Hey guys, this is Chris from AndroidPIT.com. Today we have a really interesting hardware comparison for you. We have the LG G3 and the Xperia Z2. So stick with us, we're going to run through all the major categories and see which one is top of the pops right now. Okay, so on the right we have the LG G3, on the left the Sony Xperia Z2. So we'll just turn the displays off for a second so we can focus on the design. You can see that in terms of size, there's actually not too much going on in terms of difference. Obviously Sony have the flat edges of the omnibalance, and LG have gone for this floating arc curved back. But in terms of footprint, there's really not much in it between the two. Even though if you take a look at the front, we obviously have very different displays. The G3 has a Quad HD 5.5 inch and the Z2 has a Full HD at 5.2. So you can see if I match up the bottom edge of the screen just how much bigger the G3 display is. That's mostly because of LG's crazy minimal bezels. But one of the other things is on the display front as well, which we obviously have the buttons on the side of the Sony with the dedicated shutter button there for the camera, and they're all on the back on the G3. So it's the same rear key setup we saw in the G2. We've got the laser autofocus module there and a dual LED flash there, the volume rocker and the power in the middle. On the Z2, however, we have various flaps because it is water resistant, IP58 certified and dust proof. And speaker down the bottom there. On the G3, we have the speaker on the back. But design-wise, they both look pretty similar. It's really just the difference between the flat back of the Sony and the curved back of the G3. Although I do have to mention the glass back on the back of the Sony is a bit of a fingerprint magnet, whereas the sort of metallic skin, brushed aluminum look plastic on the G3 is much more resistant to fingerprints. Now, both devices are micro SD expandable up to 128 gig at the moment, just because we don't have any other larger micro SD cards at the moment. So as I mentioned, the Z2 has a port on the side there, but the flap, whereas on the G3, everything is hidden in the back here. Where's my section? So you can pop the back off the G3. So it's got a 3000 mAh battery that's removable and space for the micro SD right there. You can also get Qi charging for wireless charging on the go. Now, if we take a look at the devices turned on, both are running the latest version of KitKat, Android 4.4.2. The G3 has the new look Optimus UI, and obviously Sony has gone with the Xperia user interface. Let's just take a quick look around the two. I'll let you judge lag and responsiveness and that kind of thing for yourself. So that's the app drawer on both devices. As you can see, we've got a few more apps on the Sony than we do on the LG. Interestingly, the G3 actually lets you delete some of the bloatware as well, which is a nice added bonus for those who don't like all that preloaded manufacturer stuff. So there's the quick settings and app drawer, the notification shade, which you can obviously modify as you wish. So in terms of user interface, the G3 has the Smart Notices dedicated home screen, and Sony have got the What's New section, which is more for music and movies, that kind of stuff, whereas LG have tied in the whole health aspect, as well as sort of Google Now functionality with tips on how to use your phone better, and other things for improving performance and things like that. So obviously the G3 has the Z2 trumped when it comes to pixel density. The G3 has this crazy Quad HD display with 534 or 538 pixels per inch, where the Z2 has a more modest 424. The Z2 does, however, have a bit more wearable integration for the Sony Smartband, and the G3 does not as yet, but we'll obviously see the G Watch coming up very shortly. Okay, so let's take a quick look at the settings menu on both devices. Both have IPS LCDs. The G3 on the right here has an IPS Plus, whatever that means, but they're both gone for a white interface, and both menus are nice and neatly laid out. Obviously it's up to you which one you prefer, but if we take a look at a few of the options, let's see what we've got here. So obviously NFC on both, and a few more settings on the Z2 there. Let's take a look at the display. So you've got X Reality for mobile on the Sony and the glove mode, which we've covered previously. The G3 has been optimized though by LG to minimize the impact on battery and processor for the crazy resolution, and it seems to work pretty well in my experience. The battery consumption is pretty negligible. It's pretty comparable to the G2. The Sony does have a slightly larger battery at 3,200 milliamperes compared to the 3,000 on the G3, and it's hard to say. I haven't done extensive testing. Some testing sites are claiming the Z2 is better, some are saying the G3 is better. I think it's going to be fairly similar, but maybe the Sony will be a little bit better in terms of battery life. Now, both devices have some battery management, so power management. On the Sony is done by stamina mode, so you can have a quick read of that. And of course on the G3 we also have a battery saver mode, which we've already enabled, and that will limit the functionality of the device to get you a little bit more juice. Can't say that I've extensively tested the batteries on either device. It's only a minimal difference in terms of capacity. Some battery tests are showing the G3 is higher, some the Z2 is higher. I'm going to say it's probably pretty close, but I would expect the Z2 to maybe just beat out the G3. However, the G3 screen doesn't really seem to impact on the battery as much as you might think. Now, in terms of hardware, the G3 does have a slightly higher clocked Snapdragon 801 processor. The Z2 is a little bit older though. Whereas the Z2 comes with 16 gig of internal storage, it comes with 3 gig of RAM, whereas the G3 actually has two different versions. The 16 gig version has 2 gig of RAM and the 32 gig version has 3 gig. So again, if you choose the same internal storage capacity, you're going to get more RAM with the Z2 than with the G3, even though the G3 has a newer processor. As far as speakers go, I was actually kind of surprised. That's not where the speaker is. There it is. The G3 has a 1 watt speaker with a 1.5 watt amp, and LG have sort of made a big deal about the hi-fi audio quality of the sound on the G2 and on the G3. But in listening, I have to say the Xperia Z2, while it's not as loud obviously, it actually, to my untrained ears, actually sounds a little bit better. So when it comes to cameras, the Z2, obviously has the G3 trumped a little bit in terms of megapixel count. We've got the 20.7 megapixel shooter on the Z2 with a 13 megapixel camera on the G3. However, the G3 has the super funky laser autofocus module, which enables super fast shooting and better low light focus as well. And it also has the dual LED flash, whereas the Z2 only has a single. So let's take a look at the camera app interface. So let's just put one down for a second. So the Z2, you can have a quick look at some of the options here. So we've got some camera options there. We've got some video. The Z2 shoots 4K video, as does the G3. And let's spin around. Hey Tony, that's me. And let's have a quick look at some of the preloaded modes. So you can see we've got full auto, 4K video, and some of the cool dinosaur AR effect if that's your thing. It's also background defocus, which in my other lens blur comparison video I didn't find to be particularly great. Okay, so that's the interface for the camera on the Z2. Let's take a quick look at the G3. So the G3 has this super clean mode, so there's really nothing on screen except for your focus points. You can bring all that back with a tap of the button there, and there's not too much in the way of settings here either. We've got a grid overlay, some timer, voice activation, various resolution choices there, and of course HDR mode, which is super nice. As for preloaded settings, not much. Dual camera, panorama, magic focus, which is pretty terrible, and full auto mode. There's also the renamed selfie camera up front with an angle that's perfectly suited for selfie shots, as well as an optimized sensor for that kind of thing. And if we turn the flash on, you'll get this sort of fake flash trick that LG have included to illuminate a selfie subject. Flip that back around. And of course we also have 4K video on the G3. When you start using the camera though, you'll actually start to notice a few differences. In full daylight, they both shoot fairly similar photos. There's not too much going on there. The Z2 has a little bit better contrast and darker colors. Shooting outside, wrong way. Low light though, the G3 has the optical image stabilization plus, which should really make for some fantastic results. I have to say that it's okay, but if you look up close, there's just this crazy post-processing that we've seen that we saw on the G2 as well. So while the Z2 may be a little bit grainier, it will actually be a little bit more true to life and less post-processed than the G3 at low light. Let's continue on. What else do we have? Up close, they're pretty similar, although you can possibly see the differences in color. The G3 has slightly better color reproduction than the Z2, which again looks a little bit washed out, which we'd also seen before. Super close subjects, it's pretty similar again, but I have to say the G3 is probably a little bit better at macro. The Z2 had trouble focusing at close range, and I think the G3 came out a little bit better. That's all pretty much the same. Then when we're using HDR mode with high contrast, I have to say the Z2 performed extremely well. You can see obviously the differences in the sky. You've got a lot more detail and blue on the G3, but the Z2 does really, really well. Let's quickly skim over again. That's focusing on the TV tower in Berlin. And then in high contrast, dark shadows and bright sunlight, pretty similar. You really can't tell much of a difference there. So I'll leave that up to you guys. We'll post a full photo gallery in the full article, which you can read below. So there we have it, guys. It's an incredibly close race. I mean, the differences are really going to come down to what you prefer personally, whether you have a manufacturer preference, whether you like the glass or the plastic, whether you want more megapixels or laser autofocus, or maybe your preference for user interface. It's really too close for me to call. I think maybe the G3 is better, but it's got that sort of 6-month delayed launch, so it's got slightly better specs. But really, you just cannot go wrong with either one of these devices. So let us know in the comments below which one you think is better and why. And by all means, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Check us out on Twitter, Google+, the website, download the app, Facebook, you know the deal. Till next time, guys.